Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to today's insightful webinar on a topic that's crucial in field of software quality assurance, that is testing APIs with resilient and effective testing strategies. I'm Sneha Singh, Business Development Manager at SJ Tech, and I'll be your moderator for today. As APIs continues to serve as a backbone of a modern software system, ensuring their robustness and functionality in no longer just an enhancement, it's necessity. From automating API test to adopting effective strategies for resilience, today's session will equip you with actionable insight to elevate your testing approach. We have prestigious experts over here. We are honored to have them over here for today. Let's introduce. We have Miss Prerna Sharma. Hi, Prerna.
Hi everyone, hi Sneha.
Hi. So she is the test automation manager at SJ Tech, who brings years of hands-on experience in architecting the automation solutions for APIs. And we have our another expert, Mr. Abhishek Kandhari. Hi, Abhishek.
Hi Sneha, hi everyone.
So he is a test automation expert, renowned for his expertise in designing and executing scalable API testing framework. So for those who are unfamiliar about SJTech, we are a leading software quality testing company trusted by global clients for its end-to-end QA solutions. Since 2020, we have successfully delivered numerous projects across various industries, including healthcare, fintech, e-learning, retail, and many more. Today, Ms. Prerna and Mr. Abhishek will take us through the resilient testing strategies and demonstrate how to make API testing more efficient and impactful. So before we dive in, a quick reminder that feel free to drop your any questions in the chat box, and we'll make sure to address them during our Q&A session at the end. So without any further ado, I would request Ms. Prerna to go ahead. Prerna, over to you.
Thank you, Sneha. Thank you for setting up this stage. That was really cool. Well, since we all are here, I'm just hoping that we are aware about API testing already, right? And therefore, we'll just dive into our topic, which is contract-based API testing. Well, why do we need contract based API testing? That is another question. But before that, do you know what a contract basically is? So let's understand what contract is in terms of APIs. Well, these are nothing but the formal specifications which are outlined, which are, to have the communication between a consumer and a provider API, right? So, just an example, let's understand it in a layman term. For example, there is a consumer, right, who wants a list of items which is mentioned in the contract, right? There is a paper in which everything is mentioned. He went to the provider, give the paper to the provider will look into the list, which will be acting as the contract, and then will be giving the items to the consumer. So this paper is basically nothing but the source of communication, which needs to be aligned to basically meet the requirements, the consumer requirements. And hence, we need contract API testing so that if there is a communication happening between APIs, that is done in a proper manner, the alignment between the consumer and provider is set, right? Well, we understood contract, right? A bit. Uh, So API testing in terms of contract basically emphasizes on compliances, on these compliances with with specified structures and behaviors. So that is what contract testing is all about. Now let's understand it with examples. That how does it actually impact it in our day-to-day life, right? Well, to understand that, let me just tell you this that Contract-based testing basically is done between unit testing and integration testing. So, when we talk about integration and unit testing, we generally know that APIs used to communicate, right? What if we would have come across scenarios where something is changed in the background? The testers were doing end-to-end testing, and they were asked to do the end-to-end testing all over again. Why is it needed? It actually wasted time of the increase the efforts of the tester. And if we find any particular issue during end-to-end cycle, then we'll be also taking time to debug the issue. But it can be reduced using the contract based testing. Let's try to understand with the graphs as well, right? So these are few of the statistics I found while I was researching for this testing. First, shows the relationship between the time and the effort. If you see, the end-to-end testing actually doesn't take much time at the very initial phase, right? But as the time passes, there is a very high spike in the uh, efforts which are being put in by the testers. But when we talk about the contract based testing, if we implement contract based testing at the very initial starting point, then in that case, the time increases gradually, but it won't go. The efforts would be gradually increasing, but won't be spiking, right? It is still less than what we are getting in end-to-end testing. Moving to our next graph, which actually shows that how will it impact the bug detection, right? So if you see that the bugs because have been found at the very initial stage, and therefore the bugs at the end-to-end cycle will reduce to very less, because all the communications were being, while integration, all the communications were done properly, and which reduces the detection of bug. So that is reduced by 30%. Coming to the third graph, it shows the relationship between again end-to-end testing and the contract testing, but with different parameters. As I said, if we are doing end-to-end testing, it will take a lot of resources at the end. So the resource usage is more in comparison to the contract based testing. The resource usage in contract based testing, if you can look into the blue bar, so that is lesser than end to end. If you look into the violet chart, which actually resembles or is a legend for the time, so end to end testing would take much more longer time if it also be done again and again, and therefore the contract based testing will take lesser time in comparison to the end to end testing. Now, the third and the most important scenario was the success rate, right? So that was almost the same, which leads to the final graph, which is for shift left testing. And that is basically we have moved our testing cycle to very initial stage of SDLC, that is in between of unit and integration testing, which have reduced the cost of error fixing, because the error detected have been fixed at the very early stage. Now, let's understand, look over few of the scenarios where we can see that unit test basically misses few of the scenarios where in the contract test would catch these kind of scenarios. All right, so the first one would be the version compatibility. The version compatibility, if I talk about, is basically what is the problem we were getting. We were in unit test, usually the target is on the current version only, right? The code has been tested for the current version. It may not be ensuring the backward compatibility, right, or the older APIs. But the resolution we got from the contract testing is that the contract testing would be able to test on the multiple versions of the APIs, right? Which ensures that we are maintaining the backward version compatibility as well, right? Coming to our second point, which is error handling and status code. So when we talk about error handling in terms of unit testing, so unit testing might overlook few of the scenarios where API should return specific error messages or status code, but the contract testing won't be doing that. It will catch that particular kind of error. Example, if we are testing a delete API for a non-existing resource, then verifying it returns a 404 not found instead of 200 OK. Because we would have seen that in many cases 200 OK is the status code we would be getting. These kind of issues would not be happening. Now, coming to our third point would be concurrency and race conditions, which is a very important cut, thing to be tested, right? Now, the problem here with unit testing was that unit test runs in isolation, missing these kind of issues, that arises because of multiple requests being generated at the same time. Now, the resolution we got from contract testing is that it can actually simulate such kind of conditions. It can detect the issues like deadlocks, like inconsistent states, and overriding issues. Right? For example, if we are testing concurrent booking requests to ensure that double booking occurs in an event registration API, this is just a small example. Now let's talk about unexpected dependencies. I'm sorry. Unexpected dependencies. In terms of unit testing, we use stubs, mocks for dependencies, which actually may not be behaving like the real external system. Example, how the third party APIs would be working. They would not be working like that. But the resolution we got from the contract testing is because it is more of consumer based testing, so we will be providing it and executing the things on the live kind of environment, right? All the real time scenarios are provided to it. So this is unexpected dependencies. Would be testing unexpected dependencies. Now the fifth thing is state management. Now, you would know that while doing unit testing, we are actually, and let's assume a real example. Okay. Uh, unit testing do stimulate the real world conditions. Like if there are unit tests often work with a mocked test, right? Resident states, transient states. So this can actually miss the conditions like inconsistent state handling or improper session persistence. All these can be missed out. But when we talk about contract testing, so contract testing actually validates the complete behavior of the APIs across all the applications, right? Multiple requests, and that ensures that the correct state is being maintained. Now, the sixth point is the performance bottleneck. So, the problem in unit testing is it does not, because it does not take real world example again into picture. So, it does not know how it will act in high traffic or large payload situations. The contract testing would be doing that as well, right? So, it will be the testing an API response time under a defined load and verifying that it meets the SLA defined in the contract. And that's how contract will be done. Now, let's move towards our next slide, which basically is all about, people get confused when they hear about contract based testing, and they think that it is almost the same as consumer driven contract schema testing, right? So, there are four basic areas, right? One is focus, the second one is scope, the third one is tool, and the fourth one is goal. And I will talk about it to understand it more, right? So when I talk about the focus area, so the schema testing just ensures that the is defined, compliance with the defined API specification is met. But in consumer driven contract testing, the emphasis is on the consumer provider agreements. It is not on single area, it is in both the areas. Secondly, the scope. The scope of, if I talk about, schema testing, it basically focuses on, the scope is on technical correctness. right? But when we talk about again, if we talk about consumer based API testing, it is because of because it is consumer driven. It revolves around real consumer interactions, right? Now the third thing is uh, tools, right? The tools for both of them would be different. For schema testing, we can use Postman, Swagger Validator. All these can be used for schema. But for contract testing, we basically use tools like Pact, Spring Cloud. All these kind of tools are used so that they can provide us the relationship between the consumer and the provider. All right. Now, the last and the most important thing is goal, which is that for schema testing, the goal is that consistency is being maintained, and we are adhering towards the design. But for consumer based testing, the goal is basically to prevent any kind of breakage which is being happened due to any communication happening between the APIs. Now, it, since we are moving towards more of microservice architecture, and hence, therefore, it is much more required that all the communication between the APIs are met properly. The next slide would be regarding the implementation. We wanted to actually show you that how we implement it and how we can use few of the tools for implementing it. And hence, my friend Abhishek would be taking it over from here. Hi, Abhishek, over to
Hi,
you.
friend. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So, hi, everyone. So, I will be demonstrating the implementation part of contact testing and how contact testing can be performed. So, basically, for implementation, you can see here there are different icons shown in the screen like Postman, Hypertest, Spring, and Pact. So, basically, these are the tools available in the market which we can use for the contact testing. But for this particular demo, we will be using Pact, and implementation is done on Pact. Okay. So now moving forward, the image that is shown in the screen, you can see there is consumer in one side and there is provider in one side. So basically, when we talk about contract testing, then it is dependent upon two services. We talk about two services whenever we talk about contact testing. Okay. So basically, both the services has their unit tests. So we for the consumer driven contract testing, we start our testing from the consumer side. Okay, we run our consumer tests, and based on test, the consumer generates some type of contract which is adhered by the provider tests. Okay, so basically it starts from consumer side. Consumer produces the contract, and that contract can be should be verified by the provider, and if all the tests pass for both consumer and provider, we can say our contract testing is successful, or if not, then it is failed. Okay, so let's go to prerequisite. What prerequisite need for starting the contract testing? So basically, first is mock services. So it may happen like our services are not available at the time of consumer running their test cases and generating the contract. So we are just mocking the services, which is as per the provider, and in-depth knowledge of API contact coverage. So basically, it means like we should have knowledge of what is the requirement of like consumer from the provider. So based on that, we will write our contract. Okay. Apart from this, we have to select tool. We can select any of the mentioned tool. We have to define our contract, and at last we integrate our all implementation, all framework in CI/CD, and we can run our test cases or contract tests. Now let's move to the demo. I have attached one video and one image. So you can see here there are different services working together. So in current world, we have different microservices which are connected with each other, and they have some interlinkages. Like you can see here, the 14 and 15 are connected, and also 14 is connected with other services. Okay, so basically, with respect to contract testing, we are not testing only one service, we are testing our multiple service like in a unit. So basically, you can see service 15 and service 14. So on contract testing, we will test our service 14 with respect to service 15. So you can see service 14 is a provider and service 15 is a consumer, because you can see the arrow. So we will make like service 15 as a consumer and service 14 as a producer, and this unit we will get tested on contract test. So let's see the video, and I will be briefing about what we are doing in this video. Okay, let's start it. So yes, so basically you can see this is a consumer side. Here we have mentioned some expectations. So based on these expectations, we will be verifying our contracts. Okay, so we can see here name if the user a ID is some kind of regex which has some pattern like this 00 dash, and create on date is like also like regex, and admin is false. After that, we can see here, given is a condition like user A from user A, and then with a get request, and the path of request is users slash user A, and that will be respond 200 okay with body like expected, and that is defined on this expectation we have mentioned here. And let's run it. Yeah, this is a mention of fact, and this is a expectation, and this is a another test case which we have defined. So it is basically a consumer side unit test which will generate a contract for a producer. Now let's run it by using pytest command. It is on consumer side we are running, so it will take all the tests written here like collecting two items. You can see here in the test new contract is getting generated, that is a JSON file which is based on the expected we have mentioned in our test cases. So basically we are mocking here, we are not actually calling the our services, we are mocking our uh, our service which is we can say a replica of our provider service, and based on that mocking we are getting a contract is getting generated. So this is the real service. We can show you the screen, and the contract is generated by the mock services. Now we are making our services up, making sure. Now our services is running on 5001 port. Okay. Yeah. Now again going to the provider side, and this is our expected schema, that is contract. Now going inside the contract, that is generated by the mock service. Yeah, yeah, you can see there is a like consumer, that is user services client, and the provider, that is user services. Here you can see there are interaction array. This array contains all the test cases that has written on consumer side. You can see here the first one. So this is the first test case here. So we have defined some body, and inside the body we have defined some matching rules. You can see here body should be match type, body ID should be match regex, and regex should be this type of. Also created on should be a regex, and regex should be of this type. So we can see we have made some rules for our provider to be adhered from their services, that consumer is expecting this type of response from provider. We have mentioned all here, and it is generated by mock services only. And below this, you can see it is a second test case that is written on the consumer side. This is the second test case. And it's a metadata that is like packed specifications. Now services is running up now, and going to our main API and their tests. You can see here. So there are three scenarios which we are going to like. Two is the negative scenarios and one is a positive scenario. For the first scenario, we will running our pact. You can see here it is a provider base URL that is running on 5001, and our contact that is uh, user services service client user service.json, and it is a provider state setup URL. So we will be running this command for a provider side. Now we are in provider side. If we run this command, and this is a negative case, this test case will get failed because of date time and ID. So out of two interaction, one interaction get failed. So this is the first scenario where our interaction are getting failed, and it is due to some issues we face in the pact. That is our contract, and some exceptions that has not been handled. But out of two, one is get passed. Service is getting up, again going, and again running second negative scenario. And when we will run this same command, now you can see here there are two interaction and one is get failed. Now if we see the terminal, our terminal, you can see here key is expected and is actual, means something is expected and actually something else. So if we see this, you can see here ID. So we have provided ID in 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 format, but ID should be in format that is defined by the regex in the contract. That is it. Okay. Now moving forward, you can see here our ID is 1 2 3 4 6 7, but our contract has regex which is not matching with our uh, uh, actual one. That is this. You can see body ID regex should be this type. So that's why it is getting failed. Now again running the third case with all expected and actual are same. Now we can see here because ID is like in the regex format. Now when we run it, yeah, out of two interaction, 0 are failed. So basically we have verified our contract with respect to provider side also. So now if a consumer wants something and provider is fulfilling that consumer need by adhering the contract, that means our contract testing is successful. But if consumer needs something which is mentioned in the contract but it is not adhered by the provider, at that scenario our test cases will get failed, and provider needs to rework on their implementation, and they have to make their implementation in that way that contract is fulfilled. So all the data is same, and so this is it for the demo part. Moving forward, we can go on like peg broker. So basically, when we integrate CI/CD in our pact, we need some kind of APIs. So pact broker provides some APIs which fetches and which send the contract in the cloud, and from the cloud, consumer uploads all the contract to cloud, and provider fetches all the contract from the pact broker, that is a cloud. So in consumer side, whenever consumer is mocking their producing the contract, it is getting generated and supplied to a pack broker. And in when the time of testing like provider side, provider is fetching all the contract from the pet broker and running their test cases on that and verifying that it is passed or not. So you can see here, this is a consumer and this is a provider and this is a contract, and you can see is it is latest spec published in a 2 minute ago and last verified 2 days ago. So it is ensuring like we can trace our compatibility, like which API version is working with which consumer API version is working with provider API version. We have a tracking for that. We have implemented CI/CD, so we can say it is a full pack for contract testing, and it is uh, in between like two APIs. So it is bit different from API testing. So moving forward, yeah, questions and answers. So if you have any questions, you can ask.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Prerna and Abhishek, for such an engaging and insightful session. The practical strategies and framework shared today have given us all a lot of things to when it comes to enhancing the reliability of our API testing. I think my audience would also have appreciated this, and I think they have enjoyed the session and the demo, of course. Now we'll move on the Q&A session. We have received a few questions in my chat box. Let me see. We will be able to answer few of them, I hope. Most of the questions are around the same, but I'll take few of them. So, okay, the very first question is, how can we design a contract test for an API with complex data or nested objects?
Okay,
Yeah,
so
uh, yeah. Go ahead, Abhishek.
so basically, as we have mentioned in our code, we have defined our contract in our test. So basically, we are defining all things, maybe it array, maybe it string, maybe it any data structure. So we will mention it our code part and our implementation, and based on that our contract is generated. So basically we are writing contract by own, but we are mocking that. Okay, so we should have all the specification of our API, what our consumer required, and based on that we are writing our contract, and based on that our contract is generated.
Got it. Got it. I hope the person who asked this question have also got his answer. Coming to the next question, that is, how can contract testing be implemented in CI/CD pipeline?
Prerna, would you like to add?
Yeah, well, I think since the contract has already been added, right? So we have already talked about how the contract is being generated using the tool which you have used, Pact. Just an example, right? After that, it needs to be integrated at a CI level or from the consumer side as well as at the CI level to on the provider side to ensure that both the compatibility is matching between when both of these APIs are coordinating with each other. And once it's like contract tests are integrated into the CI pipeline of the consumer, right? And it is in the form of automation which is there. So whenever there is any new push, it will be tested at the consumer side, and same goes with the provider side. So
Yeah.
when both of these verification passes, only then there is chance of very very less failures.
Yeah. So adding to the point, we have peg broker for this. We have implemented. We can implement peg broker in provider side and consumer side, and broker is just a APIs which are fetching contracts and from for the provider and sending contract to for the in the cloud, and based on that we can fetch and validate our contracts. So peg broker is the solution for this.
Okay, got it. I hope the audience would have got their answers. Actually, I've got few more questions, but I'm gonna take the last one because we already have a time limit, and I don't want our speakers to, be too long. So, just taking the last question, that is, can you please tell us the difference between the Spring Boot contract test and PACT? I think that's an important question also.
Yeah, so basically, there is a minor difference between both, and it is on the basis of implementation, how contract is getting implemented. So, in fact, we are defining contract in our code, and then contract is generated, and contract is in form of JSON. You can see, as I already showed you. But in terms of Spring Boot contract test, we have a contract which is written on a Groovy language. We can choose any language, but specifically I worked on a Groovy. That's why I am telling about the Groovy. So we have written our contract on Groovy, and based on that specification, our unit tests are getting generated, and we call those as the stubs. So we are getting stubs, and those stubs are verified by the provider. So that's the bit difference between it. Like in fact, we have getting generated as a contract, and in Spring Boot, the unit test is getting generated, and that is called as stubs.
Got it. Got it. I hope the person who asked this question have got the answer as well. In case anybody have any further question, you can surely send us over our email IDs. Okay. Or in case if I've missed anyone's question, I'm making sure that we'll be answering you back over your emails for sure. And I would rather thank all of you for the thoughtful questions, and thank you, Prerna and Abhishek, for addressing them with such a clarity and expertise. As we wrap up, I would like to remind everyone that the recording of this session will be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our LinkedIn page. So stay connected with us for main updates, our upcoming webinar updates also. And please don't hesitate to reach out for any further queries or any assistance you would require. I'll make sure that our speakers will respond back for any of the question you will be having in future. Thank you. Thank you once again for joining us today and have a very fantastic day ahead. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you.